Well, Fáilte Ribh go léir this fine sunny morning. Pat, is this weather going to last? Is it going to last for another week?
I'm firmly of the opinion this is our summer. No, every
Oh,
year now, hey, our great weather is coming earlier and earlier. It
oh
really
God.
is.
I know it's just got to
Yeah.
do with climate crisis, but oh God, it's lovely. It is so good to go to bed with the
It's beautiful
sun,
here this morning
the
again.
clear sky, and then get up in the morning and the shafts of sunlight coming into the house.
Aye.
Oh God, I
And for
think
the
we were
curtains, right?
there must be
What is it now? Is this
Mediterranean
the
blood,
third? Is this the third week, Jude?
huh?
Is this the third week? Is
Oh,
this the
I
third week
was
of good
it's funny.
weather?
I was trying to work out it myself. It must be the third week. Could be the fourth even. Um,
Mm.
I suppose the next thing you'll have the farmers complaining that they need
It's
water,
too
which would
dry.
be or rain, which would be a
Yeah.
reasonable thing. But oh God, I
Mm.
think I'm half Mediterranean, Pat. I think there must have been a
Yeah.
Mediterranean person inserted himself into
In
our
another life.
into my family tree.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's yeah, I'm just checking to see it put on the recording. Let's start with what obsessed millions, but it'll be hundreds of millions of people the weekend, Eurovision
Yeah.
Song Contest. I personally didn't watch it because two
Neither
reasons,
did I.
Pat, I'll tell you. One is because I think it's crap from beginning to end. And I just glimpsed
Yeah.
it when I was going to another channel and say, oh God. So I was able also to tell myself, you're a fine fellow. You're not doing this just because you detest it. I, on principle, wouldn't watch the damn thing because Israel was in it. Did you watch it, Pat? Did you
No,
dip your big
by
shilling?
the way, same as yourself, the same two reasons. Number one, it's total crap. And number two, as a point of protest or a point of principle, I certainly wouldn't watch it. But
Hmm.
Jude, there's something really odd. Ireland apparently give Israel 7 points. And Jude, by the way, anyone that doesn't recognise that the Eurovision Song Contest is now totally political is either must be living under a rock somewhere
Uh,
because it totally is. And I don't know why anybody from Ireland would give Israel 7 points. But anyway, the other thing, I notice a lot of the techie guys are saying that Israel won the sort of televote, and they're saying totally it's been manipulated by Israel or pro-Israeli forces somewhere across, because they said there's a pattern that's not natural. So I presume the old Hasbara, the old Israeli professional propagandists are manipulating it. And as well as that, I think the other thing about they're making this thing. This is great because Israel came second, but I think every Jew across the world voted for the Jewish or Israeli person.
well, that's
So
kind of
I
understandable
think they
too,
were.
Pat. Is that not understandable?
Yeah, I know, but the point is, Jude, Irish people vote for the Irish person, but I think Jewish people all across the world, in France and Germany and America and Canada and anybody could voted for these. So I think they're sort of. But the
The
point I'm
Irish in
trying to get to
America
is,
would vote
I
for
see.
Ireland, wouldn't they? The Irish in
Well,
America.
some of them might, but anyway, but this Jewish thing is it's multi sort of layered. It's not
Oh
just
yeah, yeah. There's a
we're
heavy.
a nation, but they consider it as sort of a racist thing. But the bottom line, Jude, I see all the pro-Israeli people yesterday were saying, despite all the hate Israel is popular, they're almost saying what happened at the Eurovision Song Contest. That the world is not condemning them from what happened in Gaza. We still have a lot of friends.
Oh
So, in other
God.
words, they're using a song contest to justify what's happening in Gaza. That's the
Well,
point I was trying to get to.
yeah. Let's do a couple of things about that. Do you object Ireland having voted given 7 points to Israel?
Big time. Absolutely big time, Jude, because it's been an endorsement of what they're doing in Gaza. They seem to think, Jude, I have yet to meet an Irish person, and I am deadly serious about this, who agrees with what's happening in Gaza, that they support Israel for what Israel is doing in Gaza. So I'd love to know who the hell they picked for an Irish jury that would give Israel. And by the way, Jude, if you don't realize this is the Eurovision Song Contest, it's no longer a song contest. It's all sorts of politics at play. All Eastern European countries vote for each other. Have you ever noticed it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was going to say, but I take your point. I was going to say, what's maybe they just voted for it because it was a nice song. And it could have been a
Maybe it
good
was. I
song,
don't know,
it
but
might have merited on its
yeah,
own.
yeah,
But no,
yeah.
nothing comes without strings attached and with all sorts of background.
But Judy,
I,
can I cut across you again? 70 Eurovision farmer or 70 Eurovision performers and countries said Israel should not take part. there was quite a lot of the Spanish put up a thing about with their title "Silence is Complicit." When
Yes.
they're voting, apparently, uh, at least 4 or 5 countries before the contest wanted to have a discussion with Eurovision about banning
Yeah.
Israel. And yet, how come Israel finishes second with 70 countries saying they shouldn't be taking part? There's something very odd, the fact that the Israelis came second with that level of opposition.
Well, tell us this. Was there any country that publicly said, no, we're not taking part this year because Israel's in it?
No,
Not one. I,
no,
I think
not
that's,
one.
I think that is absolutely shameful. I mean, how could you? Everybody is lamenting the horror that we're seeing every night on our screen, and they get a chance to make the most puny of stands, just simply to say,
Uh,
we'll not do it this year. We'll probably not win the bloody thing anyway, but no, we'll not do it, and just let the world know where we stand. And they couldn't do that. And Kevin
uh,
Backhurst, I was sort of following him last week there. I've forgotten half the detail, but I think what he started by saying was he was going to check with the European Broadcasting Union to see how they felt about it, because he was a bit
mm,
uneasy about Israel taking part or whatever. And
yeah,
then he came out and said, "Oh, Ireland's going to be part of this Eurovision. It's only a song contest and so on." I think that's
mm,
ridiculous. What do the Irish people
yeah,
think? What sort of thought?
uh,
Did they allow that kind of guy to get away with that sort of thing?
uh,
The more it's kind of like Trump, the more you allow them to chip away small things, the more they'll do it with big things and become as brazen as Trump himself. I think that's
yeah.
horribly shameful. I'm ashamed to be Irish when I see that.
Yeah, but here's the thing: there's a lot of this. Why they're breaking this up? A lot of it doesn't add up. There were quite a few boos. Apparently, I'm only I didn't watch the program, so I'm reading reviews of it this morning in the Irish
Yeah.
Times and BBC and so on. Apparently, Graham Norton said there was a mixed reaction when she came on. Somebody tried to throw paint at them. At the Yuval Raphael, I think's her name, all the rest, and apparently she was quite shaken. Like, God bless her, I'm not having a go at her.
Hmm.
But the whole thing about it, I am sort of so suspicious how somebody came second with that level of anger against them.
Hmm.
You sort of wonder, is this whole thing being manipulated for propaganda reasons? That's the point I'm getting at.
Well, given the outreach of Israel in terms of all sorts of things, and we'll come to another example in a moment, I would be amazed if they wouldn't have. At first, as you say, I at first was surprised. I'm getting second, and then you just think for a minute. Of course, they've got a network of all sorts of people, and they're going to.
Yeah,
It's a world. I wouldn't say it's a worldwide conspiracy of Jews, which is a cliche, but I would say that. Israel is at the back of the votes that
yeah,
went for them. Um, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the responsibility, the mini responsibility that was on every country that disapproved of what was, and what country couldn't disapprove of what was happening in Gaza, and
yeah,
they wouldn't bother their arse staying away from the
yeah.
Eurovision for
Dude,
one year.
there's at least 200 to 300 Gazans, and could be considerably further north of that, killed in about this last week.
Well,
That's a fact.
somebody said even as the contest was happening, there was something like 100 Gazans had been killed. You
Right.
know,
So, like, somebody's claimed 500 have been killed this week. I
well,
just don't know.
why do you think they hang back from that, Pat? Why is it they don't have they no moral courage? Do they not really care about the Gazans that they would at least make a protest by withdrawing from this damned Eurovision?
There's a right wing guy appeared on a television program. I think on some midway last week. A
Yeah.
guy, an Orthodox Jew,
Uh,
and he says we killed 100 in Gaza last week. The world doesn't care. In other
well,
words, let's keep on doing this.
he's sort of right. Like, quite clearly, they don't
Yes,
care enough to want to pull out from Eurovision. Um,
a
I,
minor song contest. Yeah,
Yeah, really, we're exposed as hypocrites. Really are exposed as
yeah,
hypocrites. What are our leaders doing? I mean, even Backhurst is in charge of RTE. The fact is, the RTE is funded out of the pockets of the taxpayer. Why didn't, as Taoiseach Michael Martin say, no, no, pull out, guys, pull out? And he's been
no,
wringing his hands and saying it's terrible and making bold statements, after 18 months or 2 years. Why didn't he do it earlier? And secondly, why didn't he act? I think the time for words is over, and they had a chance to act in a small matter, the smallest of matters, and they didn't do it. How
Dude,
shameful!
I would nearly bet me house on it that Backhurst was told by the government, "Don't you dare pull
Yes, yes,
RT out of."
very
I have
likely.
very little doubt about that. And Micheál Martin will say things for domestic consumption, but I
Uh,
am pretty certain when he meets the Israelis and when he meets the Americans, look, he's saying, "Look, whisper in the background." Look, we're not going to do anything. The occupied territories bill has been that can has been kicked so far down the road; it's going nowhere. They say that they were going to withdraw the Irish ambassador or something, but I think it did nothing. They didn't kick out the Israeli ambassador; she left. Uh, the Ireland participates in the Eurovision. Like if we had any moral courage or any moral stance at all, Ireland would have sort of said, "We're not taking part in this." Like there's 55,000 of us dead. There's
yeah.
120,000 injured. Gaza is flattened. 2.3 million people are starving, and we are taking part in the contest which Israel is participating in.
Well, if they had to go and participate in it, how the hell did they not manage to organize a real protest or
Yeah,
spring a happening on the thing midstream?
party
I think that'd be
security was
good.
party security was unbelievable. They
Oh.
said it was airport style security.
Mm, mm. Oh God, it is really really sickening. Let's
Mm.
talk about an item that is sort of similar because the reason we're giving out about the song contest is because of what's happening in Gaza. Gary Lineker, as you know, has
Mm.
reposted a video which is giving out about Gaza and giving out about
Mm.
Israel, and apparently. In the course of this video, there's an image of a rat, and that's supposed to be the traditional way that anti-Semitic people express their opinions of Israel or the Jews. Lineker immediately apologized, said he did not share that at all. He hadn't noticed, he shouldn't have done it, and so on. But we're told that he's going to be given the boot. He was going to retire anyway, but he was going to do from the match of the day, but he was going to do the World Cup and something else. But anyway, he's going to retire.
Mm.
Or he's going to be booted out. What's your thoughts, Pat? Do you think that's
Dude,
important? Or?
I think that BBC is puerile and and it's unbelievable. Dude, the BBC's coverage of the Gaza thing is a disgrace. It is everything. It's almost when they say how many killed, according to the Hamas-run sort of health ministry and so on. Uh, the BBC, the Israelis won't allow any Western journalists into Gaza and so on. And the BBC goes for this balancing all the time. As Gary Lineker says, if we can have a go at Russia for invading Ukraine, why are other standards applied to Israel? And it's simple. The Israeli lobby or the Jewish lobby has bought up politicians right, left, and centre, and that's not indisputable. If you look at the Labour Party, the Friends of Israel, and the donations to them, including Keir Starmer, is no, it's not. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's out there, and they've bought influence and all the rest. And do you notice Keir Starmer, despite the fact that as we said earlier, 200 or 300 people have been killed, not a word of condemnation. And of course, last week it was confirmed despite denials that that they had stopped supplying arms to Israel. It was disclosed that in the 3 months towards the end of last year, they had tripled support to Israel. And you sort of sit back and sort of say, so here's Gary Lineker, the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph in particular, had a total campaign. Should Gary Lineker be sacked and all the rest of it? Lineker last year he said that what do you call it, that the Tory government's policy in regard to asylum seekers and immigrants was redolent of the what German in the 1930s,
Uh,
that it was really treating people disgustingly, and he said the policy was very cruel. Remember, they were going to send them to Rwanda and all the rest.
yeah,
So Lineker has spoken out on human rights issues, and what do you call it, the old establishment hates him. So
okay.
in other words, he's got principles.
Well, I hear it's like I'll do the devil's advocate for a few minutes. First of all, should do you think should sports commentators, should they be expressing political opinions? For example, supposing Gary Lineker had taken the position that he was wholly behind Israel, would you not have been outraged about that?
Dude, no, I wouldn't be.
I would.
See,
I would. I
he's
would.
entitled to his no, no. See, he's not a newscaster. He's not what do you call a reporter, and he's not a journalist. He's a pundit doing soccer. And
But
see
he
when
has
he's
a
presenting
platform,
match
Pat. He has a platform, and a lot of
but
people
hold
are.
on, Jude. See if he's presenting match of the day and he sticks to the football, doesn't make any political comments. What his views are outside are none of my business. Gary Lineker is a freelance employed, and he said he didn't understand. He was entitled to his point of view off air. On his own home, etc., etc. Now, Jude, your point, I would find it offensive. Some of the stuff if he was doing that, pro-Israel, and all the rest, I wouldn't like it. But I think we're reaching an unbelievable stage if we're saying people are not entitled to their point of view. And the BBC seems to be, the Jewish lobby or the Israeli lobby seems to have absolutely blighted free speech. You're anything that's criticism of Israel, even in a sort of innocuous form, it's anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm. Mind you, again, I know this makes it a wee bit untidy, but there's all sorts of things that you and I can't say, or we could say, but if
Yeah,
we said them, I'm not talking about defamation now and our legal
yeah,
complexities. I'm saying there's just certain opinions we could express which we would hold sincerely. And I don't think
yeah,
we would necessarily say them because there'd be a real thunderstorm of protest against us saying them. Do you think is
yeah.
that right? Are we being totally honest when we say
But to a certain extent, Jude, but here's the point. Did it become as controversial to say the killing of 52 or 55,000 people
yeah, yeah,
is wrong? When
yeah,
did it become a sort of a burning issue? It seems, to say that starving 2.3 million people is now, that's wrong. It seems to be criticism of what's happening is the real crime, not what's actually happening.
yeah,
In
yeah,
other
yeah.
words, criticizing Israel is now more dangerous for anybody than criticizing what's actually happening.
Uh, I must say my reaction. Do you admire Gary Lineker, Pat?
Absolutely,
I do,
100%.
I do too. I must say I'm filled with admiration for him because he is such a lone voice. Um,
Yeah,
the irony attached to it all is I mean, I think he's a competent TV sort of anchorman in these discussions at halftime and so on. But to be honest with you, I think he's about vanilla. He seems like a really nice guy, but he doesn't have that edge that Roy Keane or somebody else
and Jenny,
has.
he's some intellectual heavyweight or all. He's just
No,
a decent human being.
that's right. He's a decent guy, kind of vanilla, but he's saying things that nobody else is saying. And why the hell other people aren't prepared to say stuff? There must be others in the same situation as Lineker, that who are not bothering their arse speaking out. Um,
Yeah,
I was wondering another thing. This is a bit of devil's advocate. Gary Lineker, you could say, can afford to speak out because you might say, "Oh no, no, he can't because he'll get fired," and that's going to happen. He's going to get fired. But the guy is 67. He's the
mm,
most highly paid person employed by the BBC. So in a way,
mm,
I was thinking it reminded me a bit of Enda Kenny's denunciation of the Vatican, and
yeah,
the Pope or whoever it was said something about I don't know, it was about Ireland, and Enda
mm,
jumped up on his feet in the dawn. No, really, this blistering speech against the Vatican. And I think we
yeah.
talked about this before. I mean, he might have had a point, but he waited until the Catholic Church was no longer the place where you
The
could get
big
a belt
force
of
it
a
was, yeah,
crozier very quickly if you weren't careful. He waited till it
yeah,
was in a sort of dilapidated state, and then he put the boot in. And in some ways, I find that kind of shameful. But anyway,
yeah.
that's another story.
But here's the thing, Jude, Lineker, right? You brought up in Leicester. He played for various teams. He also played abroad. He also was big friends with Diego Maradona and people. I think he's through his life, he's integrated with people of different races, different cultures, different color skin, everything under the sun. And I think he's been exposed and seen, in a way that maybe some other people haven't. And he seems to have no, he seems to be colorblind. he's good friends with a rare mix of people, and I think genuinely he just sees people as people, not whether they're from Africa or Egypt or whatever. He seems to see people as people, and there's a lot of people who don't think like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's much to his credit. And again, well, he's just, as you say, he's a nice person, a nice guy. Very hard to dislike him. I wouldn't necessarily want to be exposed to him for all that long on TV, but and I think there are better and more interesting commentators. But
Uh,
he's still a really, he comes across very much as a really nice guy. And he talks
Jude, by
common
the way,
sense.
here as we speak this morning, I only heard about it this morning. The EU and the UK are apparently set for a reset of their relationship, much to the chagrin of a lot of the old Brexiteers. What do you make of the fact that that Sir Keir is now getting even closer to the EU, which, by the way, is not going to play very well with Donald Trump, who hates the EU?
Well, it doesn't play very well with Jim Alistair either because I was in the car today and I heard on Nolan, I heard Jim Alistair giving out stink. He was, oh, terrible, this, and he said that, it wasn't going to do any good in terms of, the North being part of the UK and trade and so on. But somebody pointed out, well, it'll be easier to get, I think, plants and other stuff like that from UK mainland to the north. But I actually think Starmer is really talking it up as something pretty big, but not too big. I think
Yeah,
he's still tiptoeing. All British politicians are scared shitless of the word
yeah.
rejoin. That
Uh,
just scares the life out of them because they think, oh, it'll be an upsurge. You're anti-democratic. We had that vote in 2016, and you're trying to reverse it. I mean, that's what votes are for. That's what decisions
uh,
are for. I mean, there was a decision to make the North part of the UK over 100 years ago. Well, now we're about to decide something different, I hope. So, times change and you are allowed to change your
uh,
mind.
I was reading an article yesterday in the Telegraph, the British Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, has just been on it, and Lord David Frost, and talk
Uh,
about arrogance. He seems to think Britain is still ruling the waves and whatever. Remember he was the chief negotiator,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he was bigging himself up. I did this, and I had the Barnier on the run, and all this sort of stuff.
Uh,
Absolute bollocks. Since Brexit, I think now, Jude, about two-thirds of people in Britain regard Brexit as a mistake. Right. The other thing as well, and I noticed it on numerous occasions when I was heading off with my holidays over to Spain or whatever on me cheap Ryanair flights, that when you had an Irish passport, you went stood in, stood out, and the big long queues snaking around, and so on. Now there's going to be apparently easing up on sort of deal on passports, I think foods and what else? Geez, what was it? I think it's the big thing, defence.
oh,
Because of the Ukraine thing. Did you notice last week? Starmer was out with the EU big time. They were walking along, and he was to the front. So they're going to play this one as a big thing that the UK and the EU are now. The EU, by the way, Jude, are going to spend something like 150 billion euros on a defence package. And the UK firms will now be able to join in big time for that. So there's going to be a lot of lucrative contracts
mm,
for, imagine, Jude, 100, I think it's like 150
mm,
billion euros
mm,
they're going to spend on these new armaments.
yeah,
So all those British firms that make all these rockets and whatever will be in there getting their piece of the pie. Plus, then, as I said earlier, there's going to be Erasmus. The Erasmus scheme with young students.
yeah,
Apparently,
yeah,
that's going to
yeah.
be easy. The one controversial thing apparently
Has
is
that
they have
been
agreed.
changed, Pat? Has the Erasmus
I
thing
think it's.
opened up
I think
entirely, or
that's
is
up.
it just opened up a wee bit?
I'm not sure, Jude, but I think it's they remember the Brits were excluded. Apparently, they're now going to be back into. In other words, British students can now go back studying in France and
Mm.
Germany and whatever. The big drawback for the Brits, and it's the one the Tories and the Reform are going to hit on. Apparently, they've now extended that the Europeans can fish in British waters for another 12 years. That particular one was going to end up, I think, next year.
Uh,
So, UK fishermen are going to be up in arms about that.
Oh, there'll be a lot of screaming because I know Kilkeel was a great fishing centre, and there was blue murder, like they were saying, it was just killing it. I suspect, that they're probably right. That if you take the whole EU in terms of running fishing in the EU, places like Kilkeel have to suffer.
Mm.
It just makes
Yeah,
sense. So if that's what you're going to do, you've just got to bite the bullet and say, well, there must be other consolations. There must be other aspects of it that are
yeah,
positive for us to be closer
yeah,
integrated with the EU, and we'll just have to accept the fact that, like the coal mines and so on, it just the time
yeah.
has come to stop digging, or for that matter, oil. Although they're hanging on grimly to the end. Just a thought, Pat, crossed my mind, Pat. I don't know if we should be going back to it, but tell me this: you're good at geography, aren't you? Right? You're
I
renowned
wouldn't
throughout
admit
the
on that.
you're renowned throughout the world. People say geography. Go to Pat McCart, he'll
Oh
tell
my
you.
God.
Okay, what um, continent is Israel on? In
It certainly isn't in Europe.
that's all. That's all I want to know. Isn't that
Yeah.
ridiculous? Is it? What is
I,
there? I mean, have they given a free pass? Did I hear somebody saying that Australia was in it also?
I'm not sure. I think
No.
Australia might have been on it last year. I don't know if it's still.
I
But
think
Jude,
that's
there,
ridiculous.
that's absolutely that's the big issue, Jude. Because people say, "Oh, wait a minute, you're anti-Israel. That means you're pro-Hamas." No, you're not. The reason as we should we as EU support. We're allies with Israel. We supply them with arms. We give them diplomatic cover. We're involved in their intelligence. We do not do that for Hamas. So why are we aligned with somebody who's killing people? I object as a EU citizen, as an Irish citizen, to being aligned and allied with somebody who's doing that.
Hmm. Mind you, you say you don't support Hamas, and that was Gary Lineker was very keen to make that clear as well. But I think
Hmm.
if you look at the overall context, I mean, somebody, maybe it was Lineker said it actually, that this didn't
Hmm.
start on November the 7th or
Yeah.
November the 6th.
Yeah.
It's been going on for 80 years roughly. And
Yeah.
essentially, and we've talked about this before this crisis happened, it was an open air prison where people were
Yeah.
abused again and again with the IDF would come in and, as they said, they'd mow the lawn. They would kill some
Yeah.
Palestinians. They would have to be allowed to come in or allowed to go out. Everything was at the whim of Israel.
The
So
IDF.
you have these people
Yeah.
crammed together in their own country, mind you, in their own
Yeah.
country. And
Hmm.
meanwhile, shameless settlers coming in and with the IDF assisting them, all this before setting up illegal settlements, all this before the massacre where
Yeah.
the Hamas went in.
No, but
So,
no, my argument is the PLO was not an Islamist group, and Israel was still shooting them and assassinating them and all the rest. I sort of part company. I have no problem with resistance. People are entitled to resist, but this ideology of Hamas, I find it a wee bit. The way they treat women, the way they do all this sort of stuff. Yeah,
okay, Pat, I take a point. Take a point. But I
yeah,
mean, for example, if you think of the Middle East, right? There's lots of
yeah,
countries there where there's let's say, a deficiency of human rights. I,
yeah,
to be honest with you, I mean, I wish there were respect for human rights, but I'd be judging them by all sorts of other things. Plus, of course, there's any number of people from democratic countries who go to the Middle East and who work there
yeah,
for years and years and who make money by doing so. So I think that's a complicated one in a way. Um, I
yeah.
just think
But
that,
it makes it hard to support Hamas, and that's what I'm saying. You
yeah,
know,
well, I,
they have total moral right to resist Israeli rule, absolutely. But there's a problem with some of the other parts. But I haven't said that. Jesus, America right now is not exactly a beacon of democracy and human rights either.
You're right. I definitely, yeah, that'd be pretty much my own position. If you take the 180 years that have passed and how the Palestinians have been treated, how were they compressed into these bloody tight quarters? It's
Yeah,
hard to, and as you say, shot at will almost by the IDF. it's very hard to say that the Hamas are totally wrong. In fact, you could almost say Hamas are inevitable. And after
Aye,
Hamas, if they don't change things, there'll be another generation. They may call themselves something else. But people
yeah,
have, uh, whether we like it or not, people do resist oppression.
yeah,
And I suppose if you're a Christian or a pacifist, you say, no, you don't respond like that. That's no point. That's just like the Pope was saying, there's no point in responding to violence with violence. But again, as
mm,
Bernard Devlin said, if somebody keeps punching you in the face, there is a tendency to want to punch back.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
okay,
How long have we left?
we're not out of time yet. We're 3 minutes worth, Pat.
Yeah,
What was I going to? There was another little item I wanted to. Oh yeah, there was an article in the Irish Times today about why people didn't vote. I think that's a very interesting area because it is a fact that if I told you in the last election there was 70% of people turned out, you might say, "Geez, that's very high." But in fact, it's very
uh,
low if you think about it. And 30% of people saying,
yeah, it didn't
I'm
bother
not
a bit.
going for one reason or another. Now, the Irish Times article was very reasonable. It said that there are various reasons people gave for not going, that they were away from home at the time of the election. And I
Yeah,
can see the difficulty there, but you can, of course, put in a postal vote earlier. Secondly, they talked about work commitments. I say bollocks to that. I really do say
yeah,
bollocks to that. You're
yeah.
working, you're not working, the polls are open how long? At least 12
From
hours.
7 in the morning to about 10 at night.
I mean, how long do you work, mate?
How long do you
Um,
need? Exactly.
thirdly, that's a good one, is if you're feeling ill. I mean, that's very reasonable. Again, there must be ways around that, that people could, for example, send in a postal vote. And I'm surprised that governments don't sort of emphasize that. For example, if you were in a hospital, you wouldn't be able to vote in the normal way. But,
Yeah,
I don't remember any government, British or Irish, any others saying, okay, now, important that we see that it's made possible for people who are in homes or who are in hospitals and can't get out to vote, we make sure that they get a chance to vote. Have you
yeah.
heard anybody saying that that's a good, better look after those people?
Uh, no, but it would be a very interesting point. That there should be some way of doing it. But my favorite is the woman I knew quite recently said to me, she didn't vote. She's, I'm not interested in politics. I was going, good, merciful Jesus. Now, this is an intelligent woman, Jude. She says, I'm not interested. And I was thinking, so you're not interested about hospital waiting lists, about your education of your kids, about the rent or your whatever your housing and what? And Jude, and then there are other people, I'm not sure they're all the same.
Yeah, I've heard that one. I've heard that one.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
the best answer to that one is you might as well say all truck drivers are they're all the same, or
Uh,
all postmen, they're
Aye,
all the
and then,
same.
then there's and then the one says, "Sure, my vote doesn't matter." Said 7 billion people type thing.
Ah,
If everybody took that attitude, nobody would vote.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Well, I can understand that feeling of helplessness, because
yeah.
in some constituencies, your vote's not going to, certainly things aren't going to
But
change.
right in the Republic of Ireland, there's what 5 million people, so that probably means an electorate of maybe what 2.5, 3 million people.
Yeah.
If everybody says, "Hey," see every time somebody says, "My vote doesn't matter," but hey, say all those maybe even 40% of those people said, "Right, I'll go out and vote," they could
Yeah.
make a big difference.
They should. I'm sorry, but you're now appealing to my fascist side. I would make everybody vote. I have it compulsory. It's
The
part of your
Australian way,
civic duty.
you're fined in Australia if you don't vote.
Yes, and they should be too. Okay, Pat, we're getting a bit fascist here, so we'll stop quickly before we say something really bad.
Before we say something we shouldn't. Right. See you
Okay,
Friday,
Pat,
Jude.
enjoy the good
All the
weather.
best.